I'm Sunny Day. I'm from North London and I'm a creative. I'd rather say that than put myself in a box. Yeah, I do everything. My mum is from Iraq and Yemen. She was born here, but obviously growing up at home, she grew up as if she was in the Middle East. And then outside was the West.
What's that like?
I mean, for her, it's like being in two separate countries. It's quite confusing, isn't it? But so she tried to raise me that way, and it didn't work for me. I kind of took what I felt was best for me from both the West and the East mentalities. I think it's quite hard growing up with someone who has a very Middle Eastern mentality, because they want you to be one way when outside is like, no, you're like this.
What is the Middle Eastern way, for those that don't know?
Similar to, I don't know, I mean, strict. I don't know. Just certain ideologies that she has that I didn't necessarily agree with. It was difficult for me to express my opinion to her because her opinion was rock solid and like, this is the way, this is the right way. I don't really know where I'm going. But anyway, and my dad is Native American, African American, Indian. So he comes from the Cherokee and Apache tribes.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know where they're from in Africa because I think they were enslaved. Yeah, African American, yeah. So I grew up, I went to a Jewish school. That was interesting.
It's mad.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I mean, it was quite liberal. It was confusing. It was, yeah, just me trying to figure out who I was. And then that didn't work out because the teacher was physically abusive. I remember that I threw a pear in the bin because I didn't want to eat anymore. I was in year 2 and the teacher dragged me by the hand and forced me to take it out the bin. I was mad. Anyway, so I left and I went to another school, like down the road. Didn't like that, so I went back to that school. Didn't want to go there anymore, so I went to another. So I've been to 3 primary schools. That was interesting. And yeah, I'm a bit of a floater. I've never really been in a group.
Can I ask a question? Your parents, how did they meet?
In a coffee shop.
In a coffee shop?
Yeah, they were both working there. And my dad was wearing a Magen David, which is Star of David. And my mum was like, what does that mean to you? And that's how it started.
It's very romantic. And is that UK based, America based? Where is it? UK.
Can I ask, did it work?
What?
Mom and dad?
No. I was 2 when he left. He became quite sick and he lost the use of his legs. I can't remember how long, but he was wheelchair bound for a bit. I can't remember the name of his condition. I think it was ankylosing spondylitis. Basically, the joints can't really function. And yeah, so he got sick fairly shortly after I was born. Then he became a PT after they said he couldn't walk. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, that was a tough one because the pain between my parents, I was in the middle of that, and so anyway, yeah, that's
So the 2 different cultures come together to create you, essentially. After the split, was you torn between 2 cultures? How did that then?
I guess you could say that, yeah, because they had completely different mentalities. Both quite spiritual, but mum more religious, and dad more, well, liberal, more free. The different, I don't know, they were different. Mum has like certain ways, and dad's kind of like this way. this way, and maybe this way. So I kind of learned to navigate with both. So I have I'm quite stubborn in some areas, and then I'm quite free-flowing in others.
Do you think that's had an unconscious imprint on you in terms of like
Oh, for sure, yeah.
flowing through life?
A part of me is really afraid to take risks, and a part of me is afraid not to. So I'm consistently torn between the two.
And what is that? What is that fear?
Mostly fear of failure, fear of not being enough, and then fear of success, and actually being afraid that I am more than enough and that I'm quite powerful. So it's like,
And the fear of failure.
yeah.
Who in your world? Who would you be failing?
That's a good question. Who would I be failing? I'd say myself. Yeah. Sometimes I tend not to try because I'm afraid to fail, and so that's a failure before the failure is even. And you have to fail in order to
Succeed.
exactly. So I've sabotaged myself a lot in my life, like, not anymore. I'm done with that. But
So where are you at now?
where am I at now?
Yeah, because we met obviously through a thing, and I was like, that girl is so in tune with herself, like emotions. She was so in tune with your emotions. It was very vivid to me. Obviously, I was like, yeah, posting whatever. But the way you performed that day, I was like, you need to. I don't know if you understood it, but what you did there, I was like, that is beautiful, because you was able to express in such a pure way, without like, you didn't even care about outside. You were just in. You was in you. And I didn't know. So was you aware of that? Are you aware of that? Because I think there is a sense, because you don't fit, so you know the programs that you've been taught don't align with you and your spirit. Well, what is that? Do you know what it is?
I feel mostly at peace and happy when I'm connecting with people, with my emotions. I've been told a lot in my life that I'm too emotional. Actually, my whole life I've been told that I'm too emotional. I remember working with a team, and they used to say that I was like a thermometer. I'd be hot and cold, when actually I was just feeling, because I'm so used to everybody around me not feeling, because they were, following the stigma or whatever, just not being human. Yeah, wow. Oh my gosh, you've opened a whole.
Keep going.
If I think about like my childhood leading up to now, I find it very difficult. No, I did find it very difficult. Otherwise, I'm going to replay that now.
Yeah.
I did find it quite difficult to connect to people, because I wanted to connect, and people are afraid of that. They're afraid of vulnerability. They'd show me vulnerability and they'd run away. And so naturally, I think I'm going off your original question, but I've recognized that I attract emotionally unavailable men, specifically, even women at one point, not necessarily romantically, but I would attract emotionally unavailable people because I felt like they needed healing. That was something that I had to address within myself, obviously, but that was like me affirming that I wasn't enough to attract those who would be able to connect with me in that way, which was quite painful. When you attract people who are afraid of what you are, basically. I don't know.
So, what would you say, right, your strengths and weaknesses are, if you give us 3 of each side, reflecting now?
I think I'd say my strength and my weakness. I feel a lot. I feel very deeply. I remember hugging this guy that I worked with who was really sad, and as soon as I hugged him, I felt his pain, and then the hug finished and he was happy. It was weird. It was like he transferred that energy onto me. So, but I'd say, yeah, no, I've got to really be cautious with who I give that energy to, because I'm like a sponge. But then that's my superpower as well, because I'm able to connect deeply with people. So that's a strength and a weakness.
Okay.
A weakness is procrastination and trying to do too much at once. But then that's also a strength because I can do a lot. Like they say, when they say jack of all trades, master of none, the original phrase is jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. I didn't know that. So my whole life, yeah, they took that out. Yeah.
Say that again for me, please.
The jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So I grew up being told, no, Sonny, you've got to focus on one thing. But like, I'm so multifaceted, like I've done so many different things. It's really difficult, I find. Maybe I should learn. This is why it could be weakness as well, to focus on one thing at a time. So I'd say that's a strength and a weakness. You see, I'm not simple.
No, it's the duality.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes there's just always two meanings to everything.
Yeah. Well, life is whatever you give meaning to, right? It's only as meaningful as you make it, and then actually it's both meaningful and meaningless, depending on how what meaning you give it. Right? Yeah, exactly. And then the third one. That's a good question. No, I don't. No, when I spoke about risks, taking risks, yeah, that's a weakness. Yeah, I would like to take more risks. But then it's also a strength because I'm very calculated. So I try to consider taking calculated risks rather than just taking any risk, but I do have to learn to take more risks. Anyway, yeah.